All right, everyone, as we continue to gather, I want to just say a prayer for us and maybe a prayer for you. And I'm so glad that Ben's holding this with me. Other staff might pop on. Ellen's here. We just want to use this as a time to catch you up and see if you have questions, okay? So I'm going to keep my eyes open as I ask God to bless you wherever you are and whatever you're doing, wherever you're standing, sitting, that God will continue to show up for you in ways that are surprising and filled with grace and love and healing and peace. And that God will also show up for the people you love. We're praying for Ukraine and Russia with Pam and Andres. We're praying for trials about the murders of Black folks. We're praying for immigration reform and safety for all those separated from parents. We're praying for those of us who have sick elders, mommies, daddies, aunties, and those who are wrestling with children, keeping them whole. And for each of us, God knows what we need, and we ask her to be fully present on this day. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So if you're on Consistory, raise your hand so people can just know who you are and maybe say your name. Let's start up here with you, Edna, in the corner.
Yes, I'm at the Benitez. I've been a deacon for 5 years now.
She does outreach for the Collegiate Church too. And then we'll come over here to Deborah. We can't hear you, my love. Deborah, we can't hear you, babe. Are you on mute?
Not on mute. I don't know.
Okay. Well, Deborah Berg Mccarthy is one of our deacons, and she also sings in the gospel choir, and we're not sure why we can't hear her, but we love her, and thank you. Okay, and then here's Pam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pam, deacon. So happy to see you all.
All right, friends, let's start at the top. We're going to give you a little bit of sense of how Middle is doing in the world. Ben made a really beautiful one-pager for us that he's going to show. And this isn't all the things, right? But this is just some of the things. We put this together for our executive committee to kind of have a middle church at a glance. Friends, I think it's kind of shocking in the time of COVID for us to imagine the ways that we have been able to still be church in the time of COVID and in the time of fire. And the reason we'll be able to be church the way we're being church is because of you. So, Ben, why don't you say these? I'd be happy for you to do that. Yep.
Happy to walk through it. So the top is just a little snapshot from the most recent month where we have full data. So that's January 2022. And so the first thing you'll see there is that obviously, you know, we have like people come and they join worship on Sunday morning, but what we've actually found is that when we put clips out into the world and we put them on social media, on our YouTube channel, that people watch them all throughout the week. And so our worship isn't really just confined to that, 1 hour on Sunday. And so over the course of January, we had more than 50,000 views of various pieces of our worship that we put in the world, which is quite a few sanctuaries full of people. And then our reach on social media keeps growing as well. On Twitter, we had more than 9 million Twitter impressions. So that's people who saw our tweets at some point across our accounts. And then we had more than 42,000 folks that we engage on Instagram as well. And all of that sort of reach and love we're putting in the world is encouraging people to find us and join us. And so we see that in our reflected in our membership. So these are numbers that since 2019, we've added more than 600 members, which is incredible. And our social accounts are growing hugely as well. We've increased our number of followers across our Twitter accounts by 513%, across our Instagram accounts by 658%. And the really amazing thing that that love and that sort of growing, swelling movement allows us to do is to do incredible things in the world. And so you'll see at the bottom there that over since 2020, so 2020, 21, we've trained more than 9,000 people at conferences and workshops, which is incredible. And we've raised more than $2.67 million, which, especially as we start, moving towards rebuilding the church, which Jacqui will talk about in a little bit, is going to be hugely crucial, because we need the support and the resources of everybody in this movement in order to, keep us rising and keep this movement of love and justice going.
Thank you, Ben. Does anybody have questions about that sheet? Does anybody want to give snaps to each other and to the team? In a time when New York Times articles are saying, don't keep worshiping digitally, I think Middle Church is proving to the world that though it is not ideal, though we miss each other in person, we've really made some choices to stay safe and well and alive. And I really am grateful for that. We can't do this without you echoing what we say, you putting in the world what we say, really makes a difference. And let me just use that as a segue to talk a little bit about the worship in person thing, right? Because we are absolutely missing each other. We're watching the data, and some of our colleagues have gone back to church. Marble continued to worship during that spike in COVID, and they did it with less people. They had a big sanctuary, so they were able to spread people out. They did it with masks and inoculation mandates, and they stayed open. Our colleagues at Fort Washington and our colleagues at West End closed down in-person worship, and so did our colleagues at Riverside Church. We're close to them, so we kind of watch them also to see what are they doing in the world. And our colleagues are all beginning to go back. So Fort Washington, I think, is worshiping live today as an experiment, and next week they'll be live and we'll be there. Let me come back to that in just a moment. West End is going back on March 6th. Marble is live still. Riverside is going back live on the 27th. And we are looking at a March 6th get back together. But we're missing a little bit of a detail, as in where would we go? So let me just tell you that the experience that we've noticed at Calvary, not for us who are there, because for those of us who come to Calvary, though it is a long bowling alley and though it is dark and it's not ideal visually, we really love being there, holding on to each other and having a chance to see each other. But the experience of our digital audience is not good at Calvary. When Ben just talked about how many people watch worship all week long, the pieces that we filmed at, the worship that we did at Calvary actually doesn't get shared. It actually doesn't get viewed. So that worship product, if you will, forgive me for that language, but it's the best one I think right now, that worshiping product is okay in person, not great in person, definitely not great for digital. And further, the Calvary people are just not friendly landlords. And I mean, they're really not friendly to us. And what I mean by that is even just sharing our values around how to be COVID safe. So we have given Calvary our notice that we are not going to be there past March 27th, that last Sunday in March. We're not exactly sure how we're going to use the space between now and then. And so I want to be honest with you that we're looking at that with consistory and staff right now. Will we go over there in person again? Will we use it as a holding space like we did last week at Intersections and have a few people doing music and broadcast from there? So stay tuned for some decisions on that. But our last Sunday that we have a lease with them is March 27. And so we've given them that notice. Use the chat to let me know how you feel about that. Just got that, that makes sense. Ask, is there a question you have around that? Let us know so we can answer that. Fine, Jocelyn saying, okay. Trusting us that we're gonna get you in person sometime soon, because we are. And anything you wanna say, yes, so March 6th will not be live at Calvary. But sometime in March, we might be live at Calvary. March 6th, Amanda's preaching, and I don't think we're going to be live at Calvary that day. So stay tuned. Let me keep working this out with staff and consistory. What I do want to say is that on February 27th, we will be live at Fort Washington. So let me tell you about that. That on the 27th, I'm preaching for Fort Washington's 11 o'clock worship. And due to the magic of shared space, our choir, our gospel choir, is going to be singing at Fort Washington for our worship, which will start at 11:45, but will go live at 12 o'clock. And so therefore, our gospel choir will be singing live at Fort Washington, and we're super excited about that. There are 30 of them, and Fort Washington can do 120 people. So 90 of us can come to church at Fort Washington on February 27th, okay? So what we're gonna need to do there is have you register. We'll send a link out. Ben will be doing that on Tuesday. We'll send a link out, we'll have you register. You'll need to have proof of inoculation for their practice and hours, so double inoculated, and we'll need to wear masks. Is everybody clear on that? Can you let me know in the chat that that makes sense? So 90 of us will be live and the rest of us will be online, and it should be fun, a fun experiment. And we'll stay tuned for the rest of March around worship. Okay? Thumbs good? Anything? Okay, fantastic. Let me shift. Hi, Aaron. Okay, got it. Good. Yep. Adult learning. Let me know you got it. Let me shift now to the second part of the agenda, which is to give you a state of staff update, if you will, a state of staff update. Anybody who's a writer and any of you all that were really super curious know that I buried the lead on Amanda's transition when I wrote it to you, because I am so super sad. I'm just going to put that at the bottom of this email. Amanda's been with us for 3.5 years, and it'll be 4, I think, in September. She's just done an extraordinary job of being a colleague, a mentor to the team, a great community organizer, an incredible asset to all of us. And she asked last November, November of 2021, about stepping back some. And it was a conversation that she and I had over a few months to figure out what that would look like. And I think if she were here today, she's in DC today, spending some time with her sister, I think she would say this to you, that COVID was hard to be a mom of 3 kids and a pastor. It is true that several times, maybe 4 times, I know, me too, Carolyn, maybe 4 times over that time, she and Graham packed the kids up and just went to Kentucky to be with her family, just to have some space for the children to run around, to spread out. COVID was hard. COVID was super hard. Yeah, Kate, she's great. Hard on all of us, hard on all of our staff. Some of them who live alone and who work alone and who struggle, honestly, for connection. But to be a mom to 3 young kids was super hard for Amanda. And she did it like a champ, right? She did it like a champ. I think the other thing that she would say if she were here, because she's written it and we can say it, that she loves this community. It's not just a job for her. They found us first as a spiritual community, and then we picked her up and hired her. So I think she and Graham and the kids love us and will be sticking around. But it seemed to me that what she was asking me for was a way for her to do her ministry in a new way. And I couldn't say no to that. When you love somebody, you also have to say yes. So I think she wants freedom to be herself. She and I both grieved that we really couldn't stump for candidates during the presidential election. Like, we really can't do it. We really can't stand up in some ways for the controversial rights that we believe in. And we did take a risk this year and do women's choice, women's right to choose. But I think Amanda wants more freedom. I think she wants to be able to consult with us and others. And so we're saying yes to that, which means that she is transitioning and stepping back in terms of hours. So we're spending some time now giving her work away. And I want to let you know how we're doing it. And we're also spending time now curating with her work that she will do. And the strongest example of that is the 5-week bell hooks class that she's designing, that she'll be teaching. She will stay on staff, stay in our work world as a consultant, a community minister, like Chad is in California, and like he stays on our masthead, like Rob Stevens stays in our world, like Victor Green, who's in Paris, like Catherine Torpy, who is a minister who teaches. And we'll be paying Amanda, unlike those relationships, we'll be paying her for the work that she does as she does it. So preaching, consulting, staying engaged in the East Village community as our justice warrior, especially as we think about rebuilding, and frankly, holding justice down with me, because we're not going to replace her right now due to the collegiate context. Let me say again what you've heard from Claudia, what you've heard from me and Darren, that the collegiate church is just not in a financially strong place. We had a deal with Nomad, a Nomad deal we called it, with partners like HFZ and Van Barton, who were going to build a business tower at 29th and 6th, right around the corner from Marble, that in the years that precede my hiring at Collegiate, which are now 18, there had been the assembling of some small properties. We called it an assemblage, a couple of bodegas, a small mosque, a newspaper store that were on 29th Street to make a big base for this deal. We put millions and millions of dollars into that deal, and that deal fell apart. And so we've lost millions and millions of dollars. And when we send out this email with the meeting notes in it, we'll pull that back up for you. But it's like $90 million, y'all, not 10 or 5, like a lot of money, a huge part of our corpus. And there might be more to come. We're working out with the Attorney General a proposal for how Middle backs out, yeah, wow, Gail, how Middle backs out of this deal without more liability, but it hasn't been approved yet. When you are partners in real estate like that, you make guarantees for how investors will get their money back. And we participated in those guarantees. So Middle, Collegiate, Jocelyn, great question, but Collegiate is Middle, right? Collegiate is a 4-church entity and a corporate office, which is to say Middle, Marble, West End, and Fort Washington are all the corpus, all the corporation that are liable for this deal. So we share that pot of resources, we share that endowment, and we share the liability, which is the reason why last year, when we received our allowance, which we call an appropriation from the endowment, we received about half of what we had the year before. And this year, it's expected that our allowance, our appropriation, might even be 0 because of the loss we've suffered. Let me just stop there, because that actually stresses me out a bit and aggravates my cough. What gives me comfort and confidence is the leadership of people like Claudia Slasik. Our Claudia Slasik is badass. Knows, like, if God calls you for such a time as this, she is the one, a banker who knows how to restructure, who knows how to manage this kind of difficulty, because that's what she's done. And who asked our attorneys to give us pro bono work on this issue so that we can get through it without cost. I mean, she's badass. Damaris Whitaker, our president, the senior minister at Fort Washington, is badass. The woman who chairs financial planning, Beverly Shears, is a medical doctor and an incredible leader. The woman who runs our operation committee is an incredible leader. We're led by enormously gifted folks right in here, and guided also by our new managing director, Stan Sloan. So we've got a great team looking at all this stuff. And all of us, every single congregation, is having to be conservative and frugal as we make our plans for these coming years. Does that make sense? Okay, feel free to put in the chat your questions. I'll really try to get to it. Ben's gonna watch for me so we can get to it. So just go ahead and write there what your questions are, and I'll keep moving for a moment to say that so the staff model is in the context of that collegiate frugality, right? So I'm not going to market to replace Amanda right now, is really what I'm trying to tell you. Like that doesn't make any sense right now until I figure out what's happening. So some of the work that Amanda does, the kind of, let's say, chief of staff and justice work, that stuff is me. That's coming back to me, and I'm good with it because I used to do it, and I can do it again, right? So I've got that justice, that chief of staff management role. We are making some changes to divvy up her work. We're giving Ben more to do and changing his title. He's so excited to have more to do. We're giving Ben a little bit more to do and giving him a new title that expresses his role in congregational life. He's done an extraordinary job. So he's taking on kind of leadership in that. And we are adding a support person, if you will, in that department. And her name is Rachel Ward. She's in her second year of seminary, will graduate in a year. You'll see her name in the org chart when we put it out for you on Tuesday. Rachel with a R-A-C-H-A-E-L, Ward. If you want to Google her, she's an extraordinary talent.
Actually, just really quick, Rachel uses they, them pronouns. I just want to make sure that as people hear.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Rachel does use they, them pronouns, and they are a fantastic podcasting, writing, creative, grief doula. Like, we're not just getting a technical person, we're getting somebody beautifully gifted and almost handmade for Middle Church. And they will stick around with us and pursue ordination through Middle Church show. And they come in the system, quite frankly, junior to Amanda. So that's a person for person ad, but also a savings. And that's just honestly good. We're going to have Daryl shift some of the operations, not operations. Yeah, some of the financial work he's doing will shift. Danita is holding it as a volunteer, as a treasurer. We have a company that's holding it now, also like a vendor that does financial work. They're working with us and West End. So Daryl is really going to focus on care and education so that we can have that piece of Amanda's work really held by him. Elise Tirali, whose pronouns are also they, them, has been doing a great job of kind of standing alongside Amanda. And we're giving them a little bit of a promotion where they are going to be director of, what is it then?
Director of programs.
Director of programs, that's right. And so they are going to really vet programming, which is a part of the work that Amanda would have done. And they are going to stand in the balcony and go, calendar, yes, this works. No, that doesn't. This makes sense. No, it doesn't. And liaise with all the small group leaders. So those are the primary changes that happen because Amanda stands back, is that we take that work and we spread it out in new ways. It gives people a little bit more apple to bite. People are excited about their new roles. They're standing in for it, and we're excited to keep growing leaders, which is part of our calling. You will probably have questions about all I said right there, and I'm saying on Tuesday you'll get an org chart in your email, the congregational email that goes out, and Ben and I are going to put it up on the website on Tuesday as well, so you can see what we're saying. It's easier to see sometimes. Okay. All right. I'm going to move to the third piece of this, okay, which is what about that building? You know, the state of rebuilding, right? And just to remind us that we've been on three simultaneous tracks as we pursue what should we do? What should we do about a new site? Should we rebuild on that site? Should we move and share resources with another congregation? Or should we look for something on the Lower East Side that might meet our needs? I'm going to start with that and say I think we've exploited all the possibilities on the Lower East Side, except a place called Karis. That's a giant building on 10th and B, I think maybe, that I just heard is going back on the market. Do you know that place, Edna, by any chance? No, I don't think it's in our budget, but we've looked at the Boys Club. We've looked at other churches. We looked at the Wing, the places that seem to be in the East Village that felt like you love Karis. Yeah, me too. You have Jocelyn, you know it, right? There's a big story with that. Woo! But we heard that that's going on back on the market, back into the government of the blah, 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 which means it's probably going to be tied up for a long time before we, oh, you do cake too, okay? Look at all my people in the East Village, you know. You all read that story though, right? Read the story that it's coming back on into the play between the new mayor and the people of the city. And it's going to feel like it's an option, but it's probably going to be tied up in junk for many years. So I'm not really thinking about that as an option for us. We looked at resource sharing with Judson. I think you know that. That's not a good idea. And some people in our system are still thinking about whether or not we would share resources with West End. The last congregational meeting we had, you said you weren't for that. In the main, most of you said no to that. And though it is not your vote, because that's not our polity, we are listening to you as we had our own meeting. And Ben is going to put up now the resolution that Middle Church's board passed. Yeah, it's a giant wreck. That's right, Carol. It's a hot mess in there. Birds are in there, squirrels are in there, probably people are in there, right? Can you all see this? Ben, can you blow it up just a little bit? Okay. So your board met on Tuesday, had a called meeting on Tuesday morning, February 1st. And I'm just going to read this to you because if I read it, I'm not making up words, right? Whereas Middle Collegiate Church lost its sanctuary to a 6-alarm fire in December 2020, and whereas the consistory and congregation of Middle Collegiate Church desire to honor our identity and history in the East Village, a history in which we fed poor children and their families, cared for people living with and dying from HIV/AIDS, advocated for a living wage and economic justice, welcomed, affirmed, and married members of the LGBTIA communities, stood up for women and their right to choose, for the value of immigrant and Black lives, and against guns, the cradle to prison pipeline, and all injustices that cripple the human soul. And whereas Middle Church has continued to grow in this difficult season of COVID-19 pandemic, political racial upheaval, and the trauma of our fire, adding 590 members since March 15, 2020. That was the number that day. Training 6,000 people in revolutionary love and anti-racist activism, supporting AAPI, trans, Black, gay, immigrant, poor, and female communities, offering care and small grants to families affected by COVID, raising $2 million in 2020 in our Middle Rising and operating budgets, numbers frozen in time then. Whereas the Middle Collegiate Consistory, our collegiate colleagues and staff have been exploring 3 options for its future physical, physical and digital headquarters: rebuilding on site, finding a space on the southern part of Manhattan, or sharing resources with another congregation, either collegiate church or otherwise. And whereas a rough order of magnitude analysis indicates the cost for rebuilding our sacred space on the historic 7th Street and 2nd Avenue site is approximately $21.3 million. And whereas a rough order of magnitude analysis indicates the cost for relocating to a remodeled West End is approximately $20.4 million, essentially the same cost as building on site. Let me say those again to you. That part of our analysis is to have an engineer and an architect look at what it would be like to rebuild our church, or what it would look like to remodel West End Church. They don't have an elevator, get the sanctuary the same size, right? Make workable space for us there, are essentially the same. 21.3, 20.45 is essentially the same amount of money by the time you're doing construction, okay? And whereas the Collegiate Church designated all the insurance proceeds and any interest that might be earned on said proceeds toward a headquarters for ministry and programs for Middle Church, I'll say there that was a $21 million policy that we were paid, just about $21 million, with a little bit more coming. Whereas the Collegiate Church designated all of that to our rebuild, and whereas Middle Church conducted a feasibility study that indicated support for a $20 to $30 million capital campaign last September, and whereas the Middle Collegiate Church has enlisted the help of a new campaign consultant who has confirmed that stakeholders believe we can raise $10 to $15 million for the one fund that would include building a new headquarters and supporting operations of our ministry and programs. Let me say that again. A one fund that would be the rebuild amount, insurance, less what we've spent, is about 17, leaving a $4 million gap, right? And our operating budget for 3 years, because we're making an assumption that Collegiate will not be able to afford us. $2 million a year, 2.1, 2.2, 2.4 as budgets grow. So this is a one fund that would be $10 to $15 million that would include rebuilding and supporting operations for 3 years. Whereas the Middle Collegiate Church has raised 1.4 toward a headquarters to date and has pledges of 1 million more as of this writing. And whereas our sister churches are among the houses of worship offering free or close to free space in which to worship and have programs as we rebuild, be it therefore resolved that the consistory of the Collegiate Church, the Middle Collegiate Church, affirm that the Middle Church may rebuild its new headquarters. Be it resolved that the consistory of the whole church will affirm our desire to rebuild. That's what this resolution is. Let me have you take that down, Ben, so I can see eyes and people can ask me questions. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can I
Pam?
share?
Yeah.
Can I share something quickly, Jacqui?
Of course.
I feel so blessed to be on consistory, and I just want to share with you all that being on consistory is an amazing process of seeing the diversity of middle in action. And we came to this decision, but we came to it through a lot of different perspectives, a lot of questions being asked, a lot of, really sort of going back and forth and figuring out what is right for us, what is right for Collegiate as a whole, considering so many different things. I think we come and we say, we resolved this, we've come to this, but it wasn't an easy, a lot of people said, my heart feels this way and my head is saying this, and how do we reconcile all these different pieces together? So I just want to share with you the diligence and the beloved sort of, I don't want to say conflict, but it's not right. Like it wasn't just a lovey-dovey, everybody agrees. It was a real process. And I feel like it's important to know, for you all to know, that the beautiful diversity of middle is playing out in the perspectives and the points of view and the process of the consistory. I hope that's okay to share, Jacqui.
I'm so glad you said that. And I want to see also if Ed and Deborah want to add anything. I can't tell if anybody else joined us, but let me just underscore what Pam says. Your people are not rubber stampers. Your people bring their, Pam brings her, I'm a therapist who lives in the East Village-ness, right? Jerry Lazor brings his, I'm a financier at Citibank-ness, who lives in Harlem, married to a man. Do you know what I mean? And it brings her, I've lived in the East Village and I'm a acupuncturist and I'm involved in theater and art, and like everybody, Darren, everybody, Claudia, Hadaria, all of your people bring their stuff to the table, their important gifts, their wise questions, their doubts, their suspicions, their worries to the table. And then we vote. And we actually 1 month delayed our vote, right, Pam and Edna and Deborah, because we weren't ready. We didn't feel like we had all of the information to make a vote. So let me see if Edna and Deborah would like to, Pam, I'm so grateful for that. Do you guys want to add anything?
I just want to add something briefly, that we are in the East Village, Lower East Side, a very diverse, unique community. If we were to move on the West End, it doesn't have the same feel. It doesn't have the same need, I would think, although there is need everywhere. And it's important, and I don't want to, and maybe Deborah can talk about what Butterfly does, that we, that there is a program that continues to serve the Lower East Side, and going to, a very area in, Roosevelt Park, which is not served. This is what our community wants. And so it's just extremely important that we stay, you know, in that area and not travel to the Upper West Side. So I just wanted to add, and it's important, we have history there, and I don't think people know the history we have there. And I think it's important to share. And we also, you know, that is our place. So I just want to show my attraction and my need to stay in the Lower East Side.
Thank you, Edna. Let me hear from you, Deborah. And you
Hi,
guys,
everyone.
Hi,
My
Deborah.
mute, I had a new computer glitch before. I'm so sorry. I was trying to say hello. Yes, thank you so much, Pam, Edna, and of course you, Rev Jacqui. This process has been 365 degree, 365 days a year experience for all of us on consistory. The ups, the downs, the highs, the lows. There's a lot of emotion involved with Middle Church because we love it so much, including the community, but the prayers were up. The prayers were up. We were so available to follow God's direction in what works best for us and what we can afford. And what we came to was practically miraculous. It was practically miraculous. And I thank God for the direction and the leadership of you, Jacqui, and the consistory of the seniors and the associate pastors. We are in such good hands, people. This is a beautiful time in the history of Middle Collegiate Church. And just to, Edna, thank you, to bring in the butterfly outreach ministry. Our community is served by Middle in so many ways, in tiny ways and in huge ways. One of the tiny ways is the butterfly outreach ministry, where some of us, congregants of Middle, go and help feed people who are hungry in our neighborhood. We walk there, we hand the bags out with a buddy, by hand, eye contact. We love you, Middle loves you, 7th Street and 2nd Avenue. So just to say, God is good and we are so blessed. And I am honored and so happy to be able to sit here and tell you how much I love Middle Church.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you, sweetie. Thank you all so much. I'm so proud of the consistory. I'm so proud of the consistory. You know, we wrestled. We've been wrestling. We've been wrestling. It would have been so cool if it worked out the Judson Memorial Church and we were going to get married. That would have been great. Because, you know, it's green to not rebuild, and, you know, there they are, and they're like in the East Village-ish, and blah, 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 blah. But that wasn't what God was leading us to. They were in a very hunkered down, understandable self-preservation place because their pastor had just retired. That wasn't right. The boys club, Deborah and I walked through the boys club like, woo, look at this boys club. Woo-hoo. This is awesome, awesome space. Too much space, you know, like 7 floors of unelevated space. Well, no, right? We looked at this little little Pentecostal church on 4th and C. No, we looked at this little church on, you know, 10th and B inside a public building, another Pentecostal church, seats 200 people. No, everything else we did in the world will be in the basement. No, that's not right. For it to come in the world, because, you know, I'm not going to preach God is like, and everything is exactly, God's got it all. I don't know. But for it to be that the order of magnitude budget, that the analysis would show that we could rebuild for $21 million. That just is shocking, because we had heard 30 to 40. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that was the game changer. None of your consistory wanted to throw $1 million and $40 million in a hole. But 21 million means the insurance wasn't that far off. And $21 million won't be building back a Dutch reform looking church with big wood ceiling and craziness. That's not what that's going to afford. So, and I don't know that we need that. Like, we're not those people, right? Did y'all see the article in the paper about the collegiate school? We're not those people. We're these people. We're these people today who need a physical and digital headquarters for our kind of ministry that'll be the kind of ministry for the 21st, 22nd century. And none of it can happen. Zero of it can happen unless also Middle Church, you vote with us to do it. Right? So Diane asked me to say, what did this whereases mean? Diane, the Collegiate Church likes whereases because it's very legal. But what I'm saying in the whereases that we wrote is, let's just translate it to because we've had this history on the Lower East Side, because we've had an impact over centuries, not just this last year, loving our people and feeding our people and doing the gay marriages and opening the door for HIV. It's because we have a story on the Lower East Side that matters to us and to our neighborhood, and because the numbers came back in a way that it looks like we can afford to do it. Therefore, will you all support us while we do it? That's all of that, is to make a case for our colleagues, to tell our story to our colleagues, and to say we didn't just come up with this willy-nilly, and we really hope that you'll support us. Now, they don't have to vote yes to support us. But now that we've really come to this decision ourselves, we hope that they'll vote yes to support us. And what happens next now is a process of evaluating all the ministries in a context of low resources, in a context of low, okay, I'm going to come back to that, Joanna. In a context of reduced resources, in a context of, I'm going to just say, scarcity. Doesn't have to feel that way, but it does feel that way. In 1891, the Collegiate Church decided to build a new church for Middle and Marble and West End at the same time. Who knows that? West End and Middle were built at exactly the same time in 1892, and Marble was finished in 1891, which means they had 3 buildings going on at the same time, and they did it. But today's context feels a little more anxious, a little more frightening, because the money is different. So what our colleagues are all doing, we have done work and we have a little more to do, but we've analyzed what it looks like to build, and we've analyzed how much money we think we need to raise to do it. That's how we get to the 10 to 15 million. And we're not finished with that. We have a new consultant that's going to help us go deep into the numbers. Basically, what does it really cost? Basically, what can Middle fund? And are there other funds that for us to get? Is there fund from the city? You know, are there funds from people who are adjacent to us? Are there funds from grant? Because 10 to 15 million dollars is what we're going to need to get through the next 3 years. All right. So that's a question. We won't do it without you. We won't do it with you saying Middle doesn't need our offering. Aha, because we do. Right. The question that Joanna's asking about how West End, and this is the same, let me just be super blunt. West End's got a great campus that isn't ready for us. It's not accessible. It doesn't have an elevator. You cannot get, just as you are as you come to the door, you can't get in the door. And what the analysis did to keep apples to apples, like we could have said, Middle will just move to West End and it costs nothing, but that's not true. So the engineers, the architects showed 2 buildings that would hold our programming. Modern equipment for video, right? Studio to produce and broadcast worship. Sanctuaries both being about 556, elevator, so that you're comparing apples and apples, maybe Big Apple to Little Apple, because West End's about 25% bigger than we are. But does this make sense, Joanna? So we analyzed what it would look like to move Middle there and have what it needs, and what it would look like for Middle to rebuild and have what it needs. That's what happened.
And Jacqui,
go ahead, Pam.
Am I right in repeating something that was said too when we were trying to wrap our heads around this, that building from scratch
Right.
actually costs less in some ways than rebuilding an existing building, and that's part of why that number was surprising to us too.
That's really helpful, Pam. By the way, in meetings, Pam be doing the details. Yeah, that's really helpful. That's right. So it is actually more cost effective to build we can build an energy efficient new sanctuary, right? We can build an energy efficient new sanctuary with sprinklers, so there's no more fires, right? So that's all part of the story, and that's all part of the analysis. And I feel like now I want to really dive into some of your questions, because I bet your questions are excellent.
I've pulled a bunch of the questions,
Okay.
Jack, in the chat, if that's helpful. I can just read them out loud.
That's great.
When is the collegiate vote?
Great, thank you. The collegiate vote is April 4th. And what's happening between now and April 4th is that the chairs of the 4 ministries, Middle, Marble, West End, and Fort Washington, are working together as lay leaders on a process that we'll all participate in to evaluate our ministries. So, for example, we will look at how many members, we will look at how much money we're able to raise per member, we will look at how much it costs to do ministry in our context. We will look at what kinds of partnerships we can create with our own building. How can we leverage our space? Those are the kinds of things that they're going to suggest. I'm hearing in the grapevine, but we have a meeting this February 28th, executive committee, which is chairs and clergy of the churches, to hear about the process. We have a series of meetings then that will happen along the way to April 4. But on April 4, we're calling the question about whether we can rebuild Middle Church. And in that time, you might get a phone call from me or Devin or our consultant about you. Are you willing to help with this $10 to $15 million so that we can have that kind of data as well?
Relatedly, when do we hear about the appropriations for next year? Is that in June or is that earlier?
We'll hear earlier. Thank you for that question. We'll hear earlier, but not that much earlier. The financial planning committee that creates the budget can't create the budget at all until after that April 4th vote, and can't create the budget until after the analysis that leads to the April 4th vote. In an ideal world, we're finished with the analysis and we vote, but my guess is we're going to vote and we're still going to be working. But they have to have a budget passed. They don't have to. Ideally, they have a budget passed by June 30 as the new fiscal year comes. For a couple of years, we've had to do what's called a continuing resolution, just the fun words that we learn on boards, but that you keep the same budget for a few months while you're working it out. So it's possible last year's budget will guide us, but ideally we'll have a new budget for July 1.
What is the status of the office and classroom spaces on 7th Street?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a hot mess. I was feeling like at some point, it can't be that bad, but it has been sitting for a year and 2 months, cooking mold, right? It's just, Jacqui can't go there. But so what will have to happen at 7th Street and 2nd is stripping down. The first 3 floors have to be stripped down to metal. The wallboard, the wood, all of that stuff has to be stripped out. Some of it can be treated. The steel will have to be treated. The elevator might need to be replaced. And there's a separate bucket of money, guys, called code and variance money with the insurance that expires in 2023. I don't know yet about this analysis, but something like sprinkling our sanctuary can be pulled from that kind of money. Something like making sure the elevator is ADA compliant can be pulled from that kind of money. Windows that need to be whatever can be pulled from that kind of money. And we don't really know what that is yet, but we're working on that this week as well.
What is the update on the facade? Is it staying or is it something else?
Damn facade. That facade has cost us $4 million just about, y'all. It makes me want to cry. I was like, why did it just burn a little more? It burned just enough to need us to spend millions of dollars to make it, to stabilize it. The draft designs we've seen show the facade coming down and going back up, because we don't know that the the landmarks folks will let us just take it down. But we are draft designing the two towers staying, the center section coming down, and maybe going back up as glass. So it nods to the past, but has open feature. People are nodding like, yeah. That's what we hope will happen. Okay.
Is the East 7th rebuild part of the rebuild estimate?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely it is. Yeah.
Great. What types of volunteers do you need to help Middle's mission and operations?
So many volunteers. I mean, pretty soon we're going to be back in person somewhere. And pretty soon we're going to have to stay digital everywhere. Like we're never going to be who we used to be with camera in the back, looking at backs of heads, right? So I think there's new jobs emerging. I want to say this to you, like, but I don't want you to broadcast this. I say to 80 people or 108 people. One of our local synagogues, when we burned down, said, when you're ready to rebuild, we're going to give you free space. And their board met last week. I won't say who they are right now, but we might be so blessed with free space that we'll be able to use, I know, right? Wow, that feels like God too, that we'll be able to use our funds to not necessarily pay for free space, but to like create, let's say, a program on a Wednesday night at their space where we pull people together in person, or throw a little money at our collegiate colleagues to have, like, you know, Tuesday night Bible study that happens in different regions of the city, to create programs for the people who joined us from outside of the city, period, and make sure that they can have a California meetup and a Washington, DC meetup. I mean, we have no idea how we're going to be able to keep ourselves connected, but I will need you. I will need you to send your experience of worship out in the world. Read this, see this clip, echo what we hear. We'll need you to hold meetups, maybe, like come to my house and watch worship. We'll need you to help us mentor kids in the Freedom School. We'll need you to be in worship and make sure that it speaks to everybody who's just like you, because you're unique. We'll need you to do book readings and poetry and feed the pantry, right, Jocelyn? And do the butterfly and think about clothing and march for justice. Everybody's going back to life. And as we go back to life, we go back to life as justice warriors. And we need all hands on deck.
You mentioned a little bit of this, so I don't know if you have any other thoughts about what is the short-term plan for physical space, if there's anything else you want to say about that.
Sometime between now and the end of March, we will know about the physical space we'll be in and how often we'll be in it. And part of that will be in conversation with you. Do you want to worship every week in person? You know, that's a basic question we're going to ask you. How often will you come? How do you consume worship now? How do you participate in worship now? What's your new COVID pattern? And is that going to stay the same? What kinds of programs are you going to feel safe in meeting in person for, right? That's coming to you as questions for you to answer in a survey, so we know what to do. On Easter Sunday, we hope to be outside of our 7th Street and 2nd Avenue site, having worship on Easter Sunday morning. That's our current plan.
Sort of two interrelated questions. How restricted, not restricted is Middle by landmark designation and designing a new space, and sort of the context of someone who's dreaming of the front being all glass, and like, what does the new design include? So,
yeah. So, you know, we have 2 barriers at the rebuild at the site, 3. Even though the numbers a lot lower than we thought, we do need to raise money, y'all, right? We don't have the $4 million gap between what we got and what we spent, and we need that, and we're going to need operating money. So 10 on the low side, 15 on the high side over 3 years. That's $5 million a year. Of course we can do that, but we have to really commit to doing it. That's one. The other barrier is the neighbor, whose name I shall not say, but it's not potato chips. it is really difficult to relate. Was that funny, Deborah? It's really difficult to relate to that neighbor. I don't know what kind of bee is in their bonnet or bug up their butt, but they are just unbelievably uncooperative and difficult. And I'm saying that out loud to my East Village people, because we might need to do some pressure right there. If we're going to rebuild, it's going to be unfun to build next to her. Well, the third piece is that facade. The neighborhood is landmarked because our facade is landmarked. And honestly, both facades are landmarked. The 7th Street building and the sanctuary are both landmarked. Why? So anything we do there, we've got to have conversations with the landmarks folks, and they've been very lovely. Like the whole bunch of them came on site in the rain to look at the rubble and to look at the facade and said, there's nothing here. Like there's nothing here. This rubble, there's nothing here. What is here is the tower. We had to take down part of the gable because it was unstable. So they're not mean. They're not nefarious. They're not unreasonable. But we have to keep convincing them that, one, the facade being there is a barrier to our rebuild because the neighbor is a barrier to our rebuild. Is that making sense, everybody? It's not easy to get through her lot, through the potato chip lot to get to the building. So we're going to need to have that access to the facade. We're just going to have it. Otherwise, we're going to be spending a lot of money and time fighting with a neighbor who caused a fire and is mad about something that we don't know. So there's that. Yes, prayer does change things, y'all. Keep her prayer. And so we don't know, right? We're going to get an architect and we're going to design and we're going to show designs to you and we're going to think about program and the Freedom School and the Freedom Lab and the education programs and the art and the justice and how does it all work? And is there any part of this new building that we can leverage for WeWork space or for, our partners in the neighborhood who want to rent from us so that we also can sustain ourselves with some revenue. That's what I know for now. And we are going to keep doing this with you. Gather some information, share it with you because it's your church too. And we hope that you'll keep coming and staying informed.
So I have one last question about sort of the needs and considerations of virtual versus face-to-face members. Do you mind if I just say something really quickly, Jacqui, into that?
Sure.
As we're thinking about that? So the question is, can you discuss the needs and considerations of virtual versus face-to-face members in the transition? And one of the things that I really want to say to just everybody on this call, because I know that, we have all sorts of folks gathered here, is that those aren't sort of two distinct buckets of people. That like part of the reason and something we've really been like listening to in terms of like disability advocates is that anybody could all of a sudden you fall, you break your leg, you can't get out the door. Now all of a sudden, even if you live a block away from Middle, you might be a virtual member. And likewise, people who move away from Middle, who this community means so very much to them and want to continue being part of the life of this church. You don't become a different kind of member because you've moved away from the East Village and now you live in Houston. And so I'll let Jacqui sort of say more about this, but like that, I really encourage you to read the op-ed that she wrote for RNS because it speaks to our core conviction that what we are called to do is be community, be family, and to know that means everybody. We don't have virtual members and physical members. We have members who join us in different ways and all have unique needs. And so I'll let sort of Jacqui speak to that, but I just want you to hear from sort of all of us that we're really, really intentional as we're sort of thinking about how we grow to make sure that everybody is held and that we build a space that is able to serve everyone because we know that, virtual and in person are not at this point sort of different categories, but may even be for the same person, a different category that you move through.
I don't even know if I have anything to add to that then. People are noting in the chat, the article, the op-ed that actually Ben and I wrote, frankly, to back into the New York Times craziness. I don't think the world is ever going to be like it used to be for church. What is shocking, no one can believe it. And we are going to really do some focused training at our April convening this year on the Saturday, April 23rd. Is it April 23rd? How did you grow during COVID? How in the world did we do that? We just did us. So we're trying to help people to learn that. guys, and I think like in a way that, I'm a Christian who believes God does work all things to good, that first conference when we had to pivot in a month, help us, Jesus, right, Ben? From, from the physical thing we were going to do in DC to the digital thing we did, like we learned a lot. We've learned a lot. And the one thing we learned is how very diverse middle is, more than we know. And that on any given day, I'm going to just use Pam, might want to be in person because they live in the neighborhood. But Pam travels and goes sees Pam's dad, her dad, who knows? So all of us are going to, at some point, engage worship in a different kind of way than we expect. And we want to be ready for that. That's what it is. And I think digital members who are here, we always get questions like, do our digital members participate? And the answer is hell yeah. Our digital members are totally showing up. And do our digital members contribute? And the answer is hell yeah, they totally contribute. And all of us, please hear me tell you, everybody who's been a member of Middle Church, Lynn Pentecost, I know you're here. Anybody who's been a member of Middle Church, when we didn't used to talk about money, we didn't have to talk about money, we didn't use to talk about money. The reason the Collegiate Church is in trouble partly is because it kept using its endowment in a way that it just did not act like a grown-up girl and tell people this is your church and you have to do it. And this grown-up girl has been telling us that, and y'all have been rising to the occasion from basically paying zero of our budget when I first got here. I mean, 50,000 out of 900,000. We did not do budget to now doing half. And I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of us. And we're just gonna have to, if we want it, we're gonna have to do it. And I think we want it. So it's your church. If you're in Atlanta, if you're in Alaska, if you're in Paris, if you're in China, and it's your church, we need you to help us do our church. All right, it's 11 o'clock. How are you feeling? Give me some thumbs up. What's the last Virgin, Tucson, that's right. And Tuscany. What's the last burning question here?
I had a couple questions about Opera House, the building next door.
Yeah, Linda, yeah, that's right. Linda is a digital all the time here and is digital, right, Linda? Woo! So we have to keep that portal wide open. Okay, Ben, go for it.
Oh, so I just had a couple questions about the house next door, the women's prison.
Yeah. So lots of you ask me lots of different ways. Can we get more footprint? I would love to have more footprint. I would love to have more footprint. We don't have that right now. It is highly unlikely. That's not true. The truth is, the insurance company paid us $21 million. And their next step, as any insurance company's next step would be to see, can they recoup some of that loss? So that's not what they wanted to do. So they're going to do what they do, which is the insurance companies go after other insurance companies. So they're going to go to potato chips people and be like, hey, we had to pay $21 million to our church, right? So who knows what happens with that? Does potato chip have insurance? Probably not a lot, but they will go after her in some way because that's what insurance companies do. And we might end up with more of something because that's what insurance companies do. Some of you have said to me, well, what if she gave us her place because she was negligent? Wouldn't that be Jesus at work on the throne? I can't make a plan on that, but that could be justice rolling down like waters, right? We don't know. The women next door are not in their place right now. And I don't know what that means, but we have that real estate agent that helped us to look at East Village things, always having their eye on what's going on over there. Like what's going on over there? Could we rent that too? Could we buy that sometime, right? Today's footprint is the thing I know I can build on. And I have to be practical in my talk. But if something changes and we can have any adjacent property, someday that will be hot and we'll keep our eyes open is what I can say about that. And if some of you have rich aunties and you just haven't told me yet and they could buy something, let me know. Let me know. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, y'all. In conclusion, I have never, ever, ever imagined that I would be a pastor of a church this beautiful. I mean, I couldn't dream it. I dreamt it, but I couldn't dream this. I mean, I really didn't have the holy imagination to dream this much diversity, this much know-how, this much spiritual fortitude and commitment. Like, how could you imagine it? This much beauty. You blow my mind. Absolutely blow my mind. And I love you. I love this church so much. And I was really quiet. And you know that's not me. But I was really quiet about what I wanted, because I really wanted our board to know what it wanted. But I'm letting you know now, Middle Family, that this is all I want to do, is to rebuild on the site, for my legacy to be this: us back on our feet, looking like new wine in old wineskins, looking fabulous, ready to serve God's people in new ways, not putting money in junk that people think is shiny, but really equipping a church to be church in today's context. And I want to do that with you and for you and with your board. So I'm here for that. I'm down for that. I'm not really down for these other options at this point. And I just want to be, you all always tell me I'm transparent and authentic, and I'm just telling you that's my truth. This is what I feel called to do. And that we as Pam and Deborah and Edna communicated kind of and came to this together, feels like calling from God. It does feel like calling from God. So keep your prayers up in the world, that we'll keep listening for holy and keep listening for spirit and keep being guided by a sense of doing what's right for the kingdom of God, not for ego or anything else, but what's right for kingdom of God. Keep us in your prayers. And we love you very much. Love you very much. This is recorded. We'll share it. We'll send it. You can share it. It's not a secret. Please share it with people you think who need to know, okay, who missed the meeting. And thank you. Thank you so much, my board, for being here today. Love you. Thank you, Ben.